I know what the title of this video says, and I know we're less than a month away from 2024, but this video was shot all the way back in July and August of 2022. That's right, guys. Do you remember when I hit that deer coming back to Colorado from Indiana back in July of 2022? I'm sure you guys all remember the damage to my front bumper and my front driver's side fender, but something I never talked about in any video was the fact that the impact to that deer actually bent my core support and ended up eventually causing my radiator to blow up. So let me set the stage for the story that I'm about to tell you guys. I believe this was maybe 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half after we got back from Indiana. A few of my friends and I were going to drive up to Idaho Springs to get Bojo's Pizza, and about 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed that my temp gauge was creeping up slowly past where it usually sits, which is right in the middle of the gauge. We did the old trick where we turned off the AC and put on the cabin heater to try to get some extra heat away from the engine of the vehicle, which didn't really do anything because it only took about 2 more minutes for it to creep all the way up into the red section of that gauge, and we had to pull over. By that point, the heat was also blowing cold, so we were all pretty sure that my radiator exploded. And sure enough, when we opened the hood, there was coolant all over the inside of the engine bay. We also took the cap off the radiator, and as you guys can see here, the inside of that radiator was entirely dry. There was no coolant left in there at all. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a video of the replacement process for that radiator, but what I do have is this video from back in August of 2022 showing pretty much what happened after the radiator had been replaced and what the old radiator looks like. So with that being said, let's go ahead and step back a year and a half to 2022. Check it out, guys. This is the new radiator right here. As you can see, it's not all like worn and beat up. And if you look back here, it's also not, you know, entirely full of mud or anything like that. This is a real beauty right here. Check that out. Here's where it kind of broke open. As you can see, this is the coolant drip right down there. Very nice, and it's completely just packed full of mud. The clear spot here, or semi-clear spot, is where I could get to it with a pressure washer. All right, that's actually in the box upside down. That's nice. Looking at it from the the proper perspective now, it seems to have broken somewhere up here. Then the coolant kind of just dripped down, and it's also quite a bit heavier than it should be. You can see it's still full of bugs from the, 2 drives out to Indiana that we did with this radiator. And we didn't replace the condenser up here at the front. However, it was pretty packed full of mud. I have a couple of shots from when we were spraying it out with the hose, just, from the iPhone, but you can see quite a bit of mud was coming out of that condenser. Honestly, it was kind of a miracle that I still even had AC at all in this thing. The fender is still completely destroyed, as you guys can see right here. We kind of were able to yank it out a little bit just by grabbing right here and pulling, but this is the best we could get. This kind of just dangles around now. It's all broken. More of the paint has chipped off the bumper, and yep. It's just good. Well, that was a lot of fun having your radiator blow up on you when you're just trying to go get food with some of your friends, but that's what happened and it's all fixed now. However, that's not the end of this video. We do have one more thing to talk about, and that's the muffler on the 4Runner. You guys remember back in June of 2021 when Josiah and I cut the factory muffler off the 4Runner and put a Flowmaster Super 44 in its place? And do you remember how we never had a tailpipe on there? Check this out. Sitting right here in the back seat on the floor, we have a friggin' Flowmaster. That's pretty cool, isn't it? You guys remember when we put this thing in last year? Good old Flowmaster Super 44. And check this out. Zoom in on that. Look at that. Isn't that just so nice how that cracked right here on the actual muffler? If you look right here, this is one of Josiah's welds. And that is still perfectly intact. But the actual muffler itself, no, it just decided to let go. So I never mentioned it in this video that we shot a year and a half ago, but our theory is because we didn't have any exhaust hangers, past the catalytic converter, the weight of the muffler kind of just pulling down on the pipe over time ended up just cracking the body of the muffler. Although with that being said, it's still kind of annoying that it's the muffler that cracked, because that was a name brand Flowmaster muffler and that cracked, but the really crappy exhaust line that I bought from O'Reilly's survived. The original plan for this muffler right here, as you can see, we never freaking even put a tailpipe on it. We still have our ghetto downturn at the end of it. The original plan for this was to kind of just try to weld this back together, and then we drove around for a little bit without a muffler, just with it dumping straight out of the catalytic converter. And as we're driving around without a muffler or a pipe, Josiah just randomly out of nowhere says, "Why don't you just get some pipe and a downturn?" So that's exactly what we did. This thing no longer has a muffler. which is great. It actually doesn't sound as bad as I thought it would. We'll give you a little bit of a demonstration of that in a second here. The actual process to get this muffler off the vehicle was not an easy one, all right? So we started off, it was just on the driveway. I went under there with a ratchet and got one of the bolts out successfully, and then the other one rounded off. We did what any logical person would do, and we picked up a bolt extractor kit. Didn't work. Tried vice grips. All that really did was squish the bolt down, but it did turn about, a quarter of a turn.
So what we ended up having to do to get that rounded off bolt off was get, I believe it was a 13mm socket. I had to weld it onto the bolt head, which took a few tries because I think 2 or 3 times the welds would break. So I'd weld it, and because it was like a rusty bolt and getting a good ground was hard, it wouldn't always want to weld to the bolt. And so on one of the tries, I went and welded it to the bolt and also onto the flange on the bolt head. Went to turn it, the flange and part of the bolt broke off with the weld. So it didn't break at the weld, it broke off at the bolt. And I had to go and just slather on a bunch of welds onto it. That eventually got it off. And to turn it, we don't have a long ratchet or a real breaker bar, so we had to just get a piece of tubing, put it on the ratchet, and get it off that way. And that still took a lot of strength to get it off. Eventually got it off, but when we went to put it back on, the nuts were stripped. So ended up not being able to use that, unfortunately. So it was just all fine and dandy.
So the nuts Josiah's talking about are right here on this weird exhaust hanger thing, all right? You see how these are just kind of welded right here? I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it, but these threads in here are completely destroyed. We did try to chase the threads out. That didn't work, so what we ended up doing was just buying some nuts and bolts, taking this all the way off the vehicle until we can weld some new nuts onto this, and basically just slap the muffler onto the catalytic converter, put the bolt through one of the holes, tightened the nut on it, did that for both sides, and it's been doing good so far. It's only been 3-4 days since we did that, but nonetheless, there's a pipe on there now. That's right, guys, the 4Runner now no longer has a muffler. But how does it sound? Given that the 4Runner has a very small V6 engine, I'm sure you can guess how it sounds. It's still got the post-puberty ricer vibe, but I think it sounds a little bit more aggressive than it used to with the Flowmaster on it. It's loud. That's about all I can really say about it. You might have noticed in that little spot where I was showing you the tailpipe thereof we put there, the turn down is kind of angled so it dumps more out the side of the vehicle instead of just straight down like it did with the Flowmaster setup. I don't know if that's really making a big difference on noise, but it should get more of the actual emissions from the vehicle out from under the car, so it's not going directly into the cab. Another thing I've noticed with taking the muffler off this thing is that it got faster, not by much, but it is definitely noticeably quicker off the line than it used to be. Yep, so there you go, guys. It doesn't sound bad, I guess, but it doesn't sound good either. It's honestly pretty hard to get a decent sound out of a naturally aspirated V6, unfortunately, but that's what we're dealing with in a 23-year-old 4Runner. So yep, there you go, guys. That is going to be it for the first episode of repairing the 4Runner. And as you guys saw in this video, the fender and the front bumper are still pretty destroyed. Come back on Friday because that's when we're finally going to be getting into the process of painting and replacing that fender. But until then, guys, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the 4Runner repair series, and as always, thank you for watching.